In a Reddit Ask Me Anything session on Thursday, Stephen Hawking made some fascinating comments about the future of technology and what we should really fear. He said, quote, "If machines produce everything we need, the outcome will depend on how things are distributed. Everyone can enjoy a life of luxurious leisure if the machine-produced wealth is shared, or most people can end up miserably poor if the machine owners successfully lobby against wealth redistribution. So far, the trend seems to be the second option, with technology driving ever-increasing inequality." Yeah, so he rips capitalism here. He actually, I think, goes on to literally bring up the term capitalism and to, rail against it in one way or another, as he's kind of doing right here. And that's a great point that, honestly, I never really thought about it in this way before, the way that he's describing it. So, not that long ago, we discussed an article that was in Alternet where they're talking about how the U.S. almost got a 30-hour work week once. It's incredible. In fact, the bill, I think it passed the House of Representatives, but it died in the Senate. It was around the same time they were doing the New Deal, and we dropped that and obviously did different programs instead and did different legislation instead. But in the article, they bring up how William Howard Taft, of all people, a Republican, wrote an op-ed in the New York Times or had a quote that was in the New York Times, and I think it was 1910, and he said, every worker should get 3 months off. Guaranteed. Every worker. Now, you and I hear that and we're like, what the fuck? I mean, today, if you were to propose something like that, you'd be labeled a communist and you'd be dismissed as a kook. Back then, it was a Republican who said that. All right, that's stunning. But his point was, no, we're getting to a point in history where we have the technology, we have the machinery, we have the industries, already in existence, and they already know what they're doing. So why wouldn't we depend on the technology, the machinery, and, the rest of us can enjoy our lives and do essentially whatever we want to do and not make the chase of the almighty dollar be our main focus? That was an argument from William Howard Taft, a Republican from back then. Again, today you can't make that argument and be a liberal without people dismissing you as some sort of kook. Now here we have one of the smartest people that ever lived basically saying the same thing or something very similar, where he's saying, no, this idea that you have to get up, you have to go to work, you have to go through the motions, you have to live in this economic system where our main function is basically being like a machine, basically being property of our owner. Scrap all of that. We don't need that. We can imagine and envision a radically different world where we have the technology. So now it's just a matter of what do we do with the wealth that we're creating through the technology? And he's saying, if we have the technology and we don't do redistribution of wealth, that's just dangerous. When you make income inequality worse, but you have the machinery to make us all rich, well, then you're just being a prick. You're just being a greedy bastard who's trying to, in essence, keep down the rest of the population and tell them that even though we have the technology to do the work for us, we're going to make you do some work along with the machinery and pay you not that much. And then you're going to struggle and we're going to take all the material wealth because, hey, capitalism. This is how it works. Oh, you're against it? Oh, are you, what are you, a terrorist? But again, one of the smartest guys in the world is laying this out, and it makes perfect sense. And again, I never thought of it in this way. See, I'm somebody who's advocated in the past for a 4-day work week, for example, and I'm a social democrat, or I'm more in that camp, which means I don't want to scrap capitalism completely. I believe in a hybrid system of socialism and capitalism, kind of like Scandinavia and a lot of the governments over there. But what he's introducing me to here is, well, what if I were to tell you that we're guaranteed to do wealth creation through technology, and then it's just a matter of how we allocate the resources and what we do with that wealth creation? Why can't we have a system where everybody's guaranteed X amount of money because your machine does X amount of work automatically, so you get X amount of wealth, and then everybody can have a life of leisure or whatever. It's a radically different world, and it's hard to wrap your mind around it because our current context is so different. But it's a fascinating thought, and when one of the smartest guys ever is saying, yeah, capitalism is the problem. The problem is the way that we distribute the wealth, even though we can do it better and we choose not to. When he's saying it, well, then that gives me pause and makes me say, shit, we gotta sit down and figure all this out, man. How are we gonna move forward from here? Because it does appear like with the technology we have and that we're going to have, we can't have a system that's reliant upon exploitation for that much longer. We have the ability to vastly improve the system and the way it works, but it requires people in power knowing that they can no longer rip us the fuck off, and it requires organization and figuring out exactly how we're going to work it out from here.